Hello everyone. It is Professor Oleander, and thought I would do another tutorial today on DPUs. Um, I want to expand on the one that I did before. Things are a little bit different in version 3, and you can do things much like you could before. You can do them a little bit differently. You can actually sit down and do them the easy way, which we have this little string right here. You could just click on the locomotive, do the auto MU DP, circuit breaker, auto breaker, and then the EOT, and then that assigns everything. And if I go to Control F8, you can see that we have an EOT ID here on the rear. And if I click on the individual locomotives, you can see this one's set up for lead because the DPU is actually grayed out. We come up here, MU'd, and if we go over here, you see that this one is also saying that it's MU'd, and then we also have DPU lead. Now, not sure why it's doing it like this, where you have your DPU lead on the rear. To me, it would make more sense to have this guy right here be the lead and then have it MU'd. That's just something that they do it in the game. I'm going to show you a little bit differently how I would do it manually. So let's take the tags off and the train stats off. And I have a string of cars, well, string of locomotives, and they're spaced out because the whole train maker upper thing, thingy in Run 8 won't let me space them any closer together. But we can do this manually too. So we come over here and let's just take this lead unit, go ahead and start it. And just for the sake of argument, we'll go ahead and, well, I'll show you what circuit breakers you need to do to get the locomotive running. And yes, I'm using modified sounds, so if modified sounds, modified skins, I turned off reshade so that way you can't notice it. This reshade, it works for the most part in Southern California. It was actually designed for Pittsburgh. I've got several other ones, but for the sake of this one, I just turned it off. So let's run into the cab here. And the circuit breakers that we're talking about are going to be these guys. So we just flip all these up. Control, engine run, generator field, dynamic brakes. That way the dynamic brakes are cut in. If you want to turn on your gauge lights, it's the attendant call. And then we go back here, switch that over to run. That's one of the most important switches in the game. If you forget to turn that one, your locomotive won't do anything. So we just couple up like we do with anything else. I'll just hit H to turn the headlight on dim. And then I'm just going to hit Control C here, so that way you can see what we're actually doing. Put it in reverse. Brakes are off. It's not charging, so I'm going to hit, I thought I hit auto air brake. I guess I didn't. We'll just hit auto air brake there, so that way it charges up. And F5 to knock off the handbrake. And let it back up here. Now, Run 8 does some things for you automatically. But some things you'll have to go in and do manually. It's usually just easier to go through the menus to use these guys than it is to do everything by hand. There's ways to do it, but some stuff doesn't work as intended, and I'll give you an example. So if I just hit F12 and go onto the ground, you're supposed to be able to go in here and interact with all this stuff by hitting left shift and space while you're looking at something. And if you want the crosshairs, it is, let's see, mouse and view, show crosshairs on right hand, on RH click. So when you hit the right mouse button, your crosshair comes up. You can kind of aim. So let's just point there, shift space, it doesn't want to do it. Shift space, doesn't want to do it. And shift space, shift space. So what I have found is you kind of have to use your imagination. So like right there is where they're going to connect, and it's not going to let me do it again. So it's a little buggy, especially with locomotives, because you can't see the angle cocks. I mean, it's not going to let me, even if I get like right up on it. Well, maybe it will work. So those partially open, and let's see if this one will open. We'll just full open this one, because we're getting ready to start this locomotive up anyway. And CFM's down, so we can... if it's gonna work. There we go. It works. Okay. Now, I'm not gonna do that anymore, because it's aggravating. I'm glad that they put it in, but it's kind of glitchy. So what we're gonna do is click on this locomotive here, and you see that it's set up for lead. We actually want it to be set up for MU, and what we can do is we can go in here to any of the steps, hit F11, shift F11 to just kind of cycle through until we get to the engineer's seat. You see here that the equalizing reservoir is at 0. Now this engine's not running. We can go ahead and get it started now that we're hooked up. And this is something that I do is I won't couple them together while they're running, because sometimes things won't work right. So I've found that it's more reliable to couple them together while one engine is not running. I need to play around with it some more, because I know that in the last video that I did on DPUs, I actually coupled them together, and that's sort of the difference. So like if you're coupling to the engine that you want to MU, I find that it's better that you don't have that engine running. But if you have a train that's already built up and you want to put a helper unit on it, then you're better off taking control of the helper and then coupling to the engine, coupling to that train, and then going back up to the head unit and then setting the lead unit. Because as you see, you can actually set this one as the lead unit if you wanted to. But that's what we're looking at right there, is the lead unit. So I'm going to go back up into the cab, and we'll just look at everything, and you can see that the equalizing reservoir is not charging up. The main reservoir will be red until it gets to 105. That's 15 pounds above your feed valve setting. And the circuit breakers when you MU do not matter, so we're not going to worry about those. The only one that really is going to matter is going to be that switch right there, which is run, and we'll just put that in run so that way it's there. Okay, so getting back out of here, we go in between, and you click on your coupler. You're going to see MU connection, so we want to hit connected. Right? That changes this to MU. So if we go back into the cab, what you should see, well, it's not gonna, you'll see the brake pipe, you'll also see the brake cylinder, and you'll see that the reverser says MU. Now I'm going to hit F7 to go ahead and charge up the airline. I haven't done anything differently. This is all, these are both set up the way they should be if I remember to do everything. And I'm just gonna, there's an F7 bug where when you hit F7 it still has some air pressure left on the brake cylinder for whatever reason. I don't know what's causing it. It's been like that for a little while now. I don't even know if John knows about it. I actually should write up something on it. So I just bailed off with a period key. Now, start of day, when you first MU locomotives, you want to verify that they're actually working. So what we're going to do is, this is procedure that we did to anytime we had to MU stuff. So handbrake's on. You notice that we have 72 pounds on the brake cylinder. I'm going to release the independent, and I'm controlling the lead unit. This one's still set up for MU. Okay, brake cylinder came off. I'm going to do a minimum reduction on the automatic. And you see that the brake pipe's coming down, brake cylinder is going up. We're going to hold the period key to bail off, to test the bail off function, and I'm just holding it until it goes to 0. Now that works. We're going to do control home for a full service application. The brake pipe should go down to 65, brake cylinder should go up to somewhere around 50. And we're going to bottom out there at 47. Now we just do a full release on the automatic. Brake pipe goes up to 90-ish, and then the brake cylinder goes to 0, and then do a full application on the independent, and we have 72 pounds. So the next thing we would do is the generator field should be up in the lead engine. So I'm going to put the reverser in forward, and then go to notch 1. You see notch 1 here. You see that it's loading amps. Go to idle, go to neutral, and then reverse, and then notch 1, and it builds amps, idle, neutral. So this locomotive is set up for MU, and it's ready to go. So let's go ahead and hit F5, knock off the handbrake, put this in reverse, back up, and let's get hooked up to the world's heaviest boxcar here. And essentially what we're going to do for the next set is we're going to set them up the same way, except the lead engine is going to be set for DPU lead, and what that will do is the distributed power monitor in the cab, we can actually control each set of locomotives individually. And essentially what you're doing is you're just making 2 sets of MU locomotives, but one is being classified as a DPU. And if everything sets up right, you should be able to fence them and control them independently, and you should be able to verify that your fence works. It's a pretty involved process, and one of the things that the game one of the things that the game models pretty well is the radio communication between DPUs and such. So like if you're up in mountainous terrain, you can actually lose communication with your DPUs because line of sight, if you're in really hilly terrain or if you're going around some long curves or whatever, you can lose communication with the rear of your train. And on the Roseville sub, there's actually some I'm just going to hit F7 here. There's actually some restrictions inside of their what is it, the timetable. Is it timetable or special handling instructions? Either way, there's train length limits to, or train length restrictions to how long they can be, because you get a train that's too long and you lose communication with the end of your train. I'm going to load that so it's just a little bit easier to couple to. And then we'll come down here and we'll hook up to this SD70. Let's see, we're still in reverse and get this thing moving. I wish that Run 8 would let me spawn stuff closer together, but it's what we're stuck with. So I'm trying to think here if there's anything else that's really pressing. I think the procedure is mostly the same in terms of functionality for DPUs, and there's not a whole lot different. The way that some of this stuff gets done is a little different, and I think they've actually gone in and changed. Like the MFDs, when you go inside, you actually see stuff is set up differently. And yes, I know I'm going 25 miles an hour through the yard. I own the railroad. I get to make it. The yard's empty for the most part. So I'm not, it's just going to count towards my whole thing with the vernometer. Okay, so we're coming up here. Come on. There you go. Alright. Put that in neutral. Same thing. We go down here. We'll just go ahead and connect our air hoses. Do a partial open on that one. A full open on that one. Let that charge up a little bit. We'll go ahead and start this engine up. You see here that it says DPU lead. We're not going to do anything just yet. Go ahead and open this one all the way up. Alright, now that it's running, let's go in here and switch this over to DPU lead. Now the other thing that you have to remember with this one is you want it to be forward, because the unit is facing forward relative to the direction of your train. And if you had it in reverse and this DPU was the lead, what it would do is it would actually start pulling against you. So with that set as DPU lead, we should be able to go in here to the cab, and you can do this on any locomotive. And you're going to see that your equalizing reservoir on this one is 90, and you're going to see the reverser says DPU. Now, on the ES44s, I don't know if it's a bug or if that's the way that they work in real life. The reverser here is just going to say whatever the reverser position is. Again, I don't know if that's how they are in real life. I know that the 70s, at least in game, will say DPU. So I'm going to hit F7 just so everything charges. And I'm just going to bail off on the independent because I know it's going to have a little bit of air on it. Okay. So to test this one, we did the same thing that we did before. Handbrakes on. We're going to fully release the independent. Now you're going to notice that your brake cylinder is not going to go all the way down. At first, what's happening is your lead unit is sending radio pulses, and it's not sending a constant stream of data to your DPUs. It sends a signal and then it stops, and then it sends a signal and then it stops. And what happens is, this is one of the reasons why when you have DPUs you have to just hold the bail off, because it might take a little while for it to get enough signals to say, hey, I need you to keep bailing. I need you to go all the way down to 0. So you just have to be patient whenever you're operating with DPUs. Okay. Brake cylinders off. Let's do a minimum application. Same thing. Bail off. I'm just sitting here holding it. You just wait. And it goes to 0. We're going to do a full service. And there's a full service. Brake cylinder coming up. And then we do a full release. And that's all there. And then a full application. And there it goes. Okay. So now we do a load test. I want to come over here. We're not going to... The way that the game works is it just kind of ignores those. We're just going to make sure the thing is in run. And then I'm going to put the reverser in forward. Go to notch 1. Give it a second. You see notch 1. There's our tractive effort. Go to idle. And back to idle. And we're going to go to neutral and reverse. Notch 1. Idle. And then back to neutral. So this one is set up for DPU lead. Now we want to, way down yonder, we've got another locomotive that we want to MU to this one, and the procedure is going to be the same as it was for the other one. So let's go ahead and just back on up here, and we'll couple onto this war bonnet here, and we'll MU this one together, and then we'll have our DPU string. Now I could have went up there and tested the fences to make sure that it works, but we're going to do that at the very end once we get everything together. because I want to verify that we've got the at least all of these working together. Really, when you do this, you would want to couple them as you connect them, but you know, we want to, because if you have a problem with one of them, you want to know which one it is. But for the sake of this one, I'm just going to go ahead and put them all together. The chances of having a DPU failure in run 8 is kind of rare. I've had failures on high or often for a long time in this game, and I've never really had a failure per se. Maybe it's just me. And watch, maybe now I'm gonna have 100 of them. All right, so let's see here. Get on up here and get this thing coupled. And like I said, this is going to be the same procedure as it was in the very first one. Come on, a little bit more. You got to remember, DPUs, you're going to take a little bit more time with everything because of how the signaling works. And there we go. Alright, put that in neutral. And again, you're going to see lead. We go between here. We're going to connect, open, do a partial open, wait for your CFM to come down, then go ahead and do an open. And then while that's going on, we'll go ahead and start. And I'm going to go ahead and hit F7 just so that the air will charge up. And now this locomotive's running. Okay, it is running now. Go in between, get connected. You'll see MU connection okay. And now let's go into the, let's get back into the cab and we'll look at the MFD. And it's been a while since I did this on a -9, so this might be a little different. Same thing, equalizer reservoir is at 0, just like we do saw in the lead unit. The independence and trail. Auto brake says cut in. That should technically be cut out. I don't know why it says cut in. It should be cut out, because typically what you would do is you would take your automatic and where's the automatic? There it is. Okay. You take your automatic, you'd put it into handle off, bleed your equalizing reservoir and your brake pipe down. Then you would go to cut out. You do the same thing with your independent. Fully release your independent, put your independent in 26 trail, and then you would couple up your MU lines, and then the lead locomotive would then take control of it. So that's a little... That one always kind of throws me for a loop. One other thing that we can do with our DPUs when we have one on the bottom like this is we can go to the coupler, attach EOT, and see how it says built-in EOT. You won't have a FRED on there, but what will happen is these locomotives have a transponder in them, for lack of a better term, and it may be called transponder, that actually serves as the EOT. So right there. Okay, so same thing that we did before. I'm just going to hold bail off for just a second just to make sure we don't have anything. This would be your PTC stuff. It's not working in game. There's actually something that's being worked on to have a functioning PTC, but don't know when it's a third-party thing. It's not something that's available in game, but don't know when the release of that's going to be. Okay. Same deal, fully release the independent, and you're going to have to wait. This is a short train, and you see how much you're having to wait. It goes to 9, give it a second, it'll go to 0. As soon as the next radio signal comes up, there it is. And then we're going to go to minimum. You'll see the brake pipe come down. You'll see the brake cylinder go up. And then we want to bail off and just hold. Just hold until it goes to 0. And there it goes to 0. Full application. And there comes the brake cylinder. I thought that was going to be a bug. And once you see the brake cylinders up, you can go to full release. That all comes back off. Full application on your independent. And there it is. And then the same thing, we want to go to forward. And before I forget, we want to make sure that we are in run. Notch 1. There's loading. Back to idle. Reverse. Notch 1. And there it goes. There's our amps. And back to idle. And then neutral. And that is how you set up DPUs manually. So I'm going to go back to the lead unit here. Well, actually, there's one thing we need to do beforehand. For DPU operations, headlight switches, which you'll see them here in the right here in this little section. Single middle is just that. Single middle, your locomotives that are going to be here in the middle, that's why they would be set. So this one and this one go to single middle. Your lead locomotive, you're going to set it to short hood lead. Your trailing locomotive, you're going to set this one to short hood trail. If this was long hood facing the bottom, you would go to long hood trail. Or if it was, if you were running long hood forward, you would go to long hood lead on your lead locomotive. And what this does is if I come up here and I hit H, which we're already in dim, hit H, you can control the headlight on the rear unit from the head end. So if I hit J, give it a second, and I did say, yeah, there it is. Okay, it was just taking a while. It took something like 5 or 10 seconds. And then now you've got your headlight on low beams, and if we hit it again, and wait, and wait, and wait, the ditch light should come on. There they go. Okay, so I'm going to turn that off. And yes, I'm using a flare modification there for that. Okay, so let's go back up into the cab of the lead locomotive. And I'm going to go down here, and I already have this one set up. I'm just going to hit the Z key, and you can go back and forth through these. We'll go to the DPU screen. And then I want to test the fence to make sure that it's going to work. So shift and then the left bracket key will put a fence up. And what that does is it you're able to control your lead and DPUs individually. So we have a fence set between the lead locomotive and our rear DPU. So I can put the head locomotive in notch 1. And see how it says F idle? That's the command that's going to your DPU. Okay, so right now our fence is working. So go back to idle. Now let's say that I want to increase the power of our, or I want it to go to notch 1, or I want it to go to forward. What I do is, you hold shift, and then you don't have to hold shift, but you put your reverser in forward, and I think it ignores the fence. I haven't really looked into it all that much. And then just hit shift and the quotation marks key. You see there that it says F N1. That's telling the trailing unit that it wants it to go to notch 1. And there's notch 0. notch 1, and you see the amperage. So that's saying that the locomotive is loading. And then if we do shift and then the colon key, that will go to idle here in just a second. There's idle. And give it another second. Our amps are gone. And then same thing, if we go into reverse and we hit shift and quotation marks, you'll see it. I can actually hear it too in my headphones. You see that it's loading. And we go back to idle. And that goes back to idle. You can also set your trailing units up into dynamics independently. So hold shift and the divide key in your number pad, and you see BO, which stands for brakes. And you see now it's in setup, it's in B0, and if we hold, let's see here, shift and the colon key, or I'm sorry, shift and the quotation mark key. Where's it? Nope, wrong one. Nope. There it goes. It's backwards from, I was trying to remember, it's backwards from the way that it's supposed to be for the throttle. So it's B and the colon key, and then that'll let you go back and forth. And then B and shift and quotation marks will go forward. We'll go backwards from throttle. If you want to increase your dynamics, you have to hit shift colon. If you want to decrease your dynamics, you hit shift quotation marks. If you wanted to increase the throttle, you hit shift and quotation marks. If you want to decrease the throttle, it's shift colon. Or semicolon. It's backwards from each other. Okay, so we saw that that worked. And then to take it out of dynamics, you hit shift and then the divide key. Now what you can do is, if let's say that you have your lead locomotive in power, there's a couple different things you can do. Let's just say let's put this in neutral. Let's just say that I'm sitting here in notch 8. Or better yet, this would be a more realistic scenario for you. Let's say that I'm in dynamics. Oops. I don't know why I was doing that. So let's just say that I'm in full dynamics. We have a long train and we've got the trail locomotive in notch 8. Now hopefully this isn't going to move. I'm actually going to hit, well, I don't want to hit shift F5 because it's going to put everything down to 0. So let's just say that we have a long train, we're pushing up over top of a hill. The lead is going down a fairly steep grade. So you've got the lead in dynamics, and you've got the trailing units are pushing as hard as they can, trying to keep everything from breaking into as you're going over the peak at the top of the grade. So what you can do is, there's a couple different ways to go about this. You can either start backing down your throttle on your locomotives, and it'll eventually drop down. There's notch 6. And once you get to the point where, let's say that we're starting to back off on our dynamics now, and let's just say that we're down to like B3 or something like that. Okay, so let's take these guys all the way down to idle. And as soon as it goes to idle here, which should be coming fairly quick. Alright, and then we'll go order it to go into dynamic setup. And you got to remember, all this takes time, so you kind of got to plan ahead. Actually, I didn't mean to do that. Go back into idle. Now, if I knock the fence down with the shift right bracket, what will happen is it will automatically tell the rear units to match whatever the lead unit is doing. So if you're coming up over a hill and you've got a little bit of dynamic on your head unit, once you get your rear units down to idle, you can just take the fence down, unless you want to control them independently. And that's something that I've done. I've done it both ways. I've taken the fence down and let it just match, or I've actually sat here with the fence on, and I'll have like the lead locomotive in dynamics, and I'm just sitting here easing the dynamics on with the rear DPU until I get close, and then I just take the fence down, and then they sync with each other. So there's a couple different ways to do it. I'm going to take it down, and let's just go ahead and go back to idle, and then it goes to 0, and then take it out of setup, and then that should go to setup. And then one other thing that I wanted to show you is if I do a full application here, you notice that you have a brake pipe, brake cylinder, main reservoir for all of your DPUs. Now, you don't get to see your individual MU locomotives to your DPU leads, but you kind of have to assume that whatever the lead DPU is doing is what all the MUs are doing, because they're all tied together physically. So it's kind of a little bit of faith as far as if that's going to work. But you can see here that you can control up to 6 DPUs. So if I wanted to make 6 more of these, you could do that way. I could actually go back here and I could set this locomotive up here for DPU lead. You'd have to disable your MU connection. And let's see if this is actually going to work. So if I just go and say that's disconnected, and then I take this one and I say I want you to be DPU lead with reverse because it's facing reversed. And if I come up in here, now I have 3 DPUs. If I go to the rear and I tell this one, hey, I don't want you to be an MU anymore, and we disconnect it, and then I tell it, hey, you're DPU lead, and then I go back into the head of the head unit. Now I have 4 DPUs, and you can set your fences up. Oops, I gotta do, let's see here. Oh, there it is. So now I can fence any one of these. I can control these 2 in pairs. I can, it's going to do a radio signal instead of an MU connection line, and then I can go and tell the other unit, hey, I want you to go into idle 2, or go into notch 1. And then, like if we want to take the lead units up to notch 2, do the same thing, move the fence, it matches with what the other ones have been told. It should go to notch 1. Is it going to go to notch 1? There it goes. Okay. But I can move these, and then you can just move your fence back and forth. So there's a couple of different ways that you can set it up. That's one of the reasons why you have so many, because I don't know of any railroads where you have more than 3 sets of locomotives in any one consist. I'm sure that there's some special cases for very, very heavy trains. But if you wanted to set it up where, like, if you're in a terrain, if you're in somewhere like, I'm trying to think here, if you've got a train that's headed somewhere where you're gonna need a lot of power, like let's say Bakersfield. So if you're going up to Bakersfield, if you're going through Mojave and you go over, is it Bear Mountain? The big grade going up the Mojave subdivision, going into Bakersfield. You need a lot of horsepower to go up that grade. Once you get off the grade and you're down on the other side of it, you don't necessarily need a whole lot going past Bakersfield. There's some hills up there, but you're not going to need anywhere near as much power as you had before. So if you're going in with like 3.5, 4 horsepower per ton, and then you get past that, you don't need quite that much. So one of the ways that you can do it on the fly is if you have set your other units up as DPU leads, you can control them from the front cab. Like you can have your lead unit pulling hard and then have your other units, just like this, where you can go in between them all and you can set them all differently so that you're not sitting there constantly up against your speed limit. So that's just one thing. You could do that down in CSX as well, on the A line where the terrain is relatively flat. There's a few hills down there, but nothing anywhere near what you would see out here in the West. So that's all I have on DPUs, and hopefully that is useful to some of you. There's many different ways to skin a cat whenever you're when you're playing with trains in this game, which is one of the reasons why I like it. Why are you stopped? Who is holding up my railroad? I need to... Is it not going to let me throw this one back? Auto's being a pain today, and I don't like it. I don't know why this is not letting me throw. Apparently Auto's got control of it. So I'm going to leave him be. I think what's happening is he's waiting for this train right here to get out of the way. He's stopped for a crew change or something. I'll get it sorted here in a minute. Auto's just being a pain lately. I have a very busy railroad and he's not liking it. So if you have any questions, put them in the comments and I will try to answer them. And I'll see you next time.